Welcome back to today's session. I hope you were well. In the session that I covered previously, I talked about your thoughts, how they are formed, and how they affect you. Let me preface today's session by simply saying that there are certain laws that govern how things work in this beautiful universe that we live in. We do not always understand or know the laws. Sometimes we're not aware that the laws exist. In the absence of said knowledge, we abuse ourselves and our environment. The laws still exist nonetheless. If you understand the laws that exist and that are designed to make life more meaningful for you and I, life can become more of an adventure rather than a suffering without end. A healthy, happy, depression-free life is possible. It's possible for you, it's possible for me, it's possible for anyone who seeks. It's possible because of the laws that exist. Life is suffering, yes, but life does not place undue burden beyond our ability to shoulder. Yes, the burden will be very different for different people, but we all have the capacity. And the key question is, why do we struggle to shoulder this burden? Why do we struggle to carry our cross? Well, one of the reasons is because we have no reserve. We have no mental reserve, physical reserve, or even spiritual awareness of our greatness. We are spiritual beings, we live in a physical body, we have an intellect, and our intellectual faculties allow us to, in many ways, create our environment, transform our present state, and in many ways gives us powers like the angels, where we can have heaven whilst on earth. Absent how the laws work and absent how the intellect is supposed to function, we suffer. Depression is one of those ways via which we suffer. Now, the thoughts process is something that anyone can understand. The simple formula works as follows. In science or in theology, you're told that if you want to understand something, you go to effectively this very basic definition. Who are we? And how are we supposed to function? There are only two ways to understand who you really are. You can choose a different pathway if you choose, but fundamentally, I think there are two. One is science, the other is theology or religion. And one will tell you that things work based on a relationship between causes and effects. It's called the law of cause and effect. Energy works in the same way. Order and chaos. In theology, you'll be told that you reap what you sow. The law of sowing and the law of reaping. But what you find between both science and theology or religion is an understanding of the fact that there is a law that exists. The law undergirds how things function. If you understand the law, you minimize suffering. If you understand gravity, you minimize suffering, but you maximize, you might say, pleasure and progress. Your thoughts function by the law of cause and effect. If you think of a certain thought, you will get a certain effect. That's guaranteed. You may not get the effect immediately, but you will get it. Wherever you sow, comes back. It's the whole saying, my word shall not return to me void. It will accomplish that to which it has been sent. In other words, your words are simply your thoughts covered in human form. And the word became flesh simply means your thoughts came into manifestation in this physical world we have, and therefore has become real. So for most of us, what we find is sometimes when we see things in our present, we are not able to connect that it is simply an outcome of a certain action. So an activity, an outcome in the present will produce fruit in the future. But we struggle to connect at the point where we have the harvest of our ideas and thoughts. We fail and we do not know how to connect the outcome, the harvest, with the sowing. The law of cause and effect, the law of sowing and reaping, action, reaction are all the same. If you're suffering from depression and constant anxiety, uncertainty, worry, doubt, it is an indication that at the root level, there's something that is not operating as it should. In other words, if you're not happy with the outcome, it means something should have been changed in the input. If you're happy with the outcome, then there's nothing to be changed. So the first question, as you deal with this whole thought and mind thing, is to say, are you happy with the results you were getting, the life you have? If it's a life of well-being and abundance and life and happiness and joy, then you might be content, but striving for a better one, which is always an admirable goal. But if you find that you're filled with a life of regret, sadness, worry, doubt, fear, anxiety, and depression, and you're not happy with the outcomes, you can change it. You do not have to live your life in the same way that you have been living in the past. And if there is any form of perhaps unhappiness, it means that you have paid a price in the past for that suffering. And therefore, you don't have to pay the price again. You can change. And the starting point is to recognize that there is a way. It won't come easy. There will be some work required. I stated in the start of the second part of the series that it starts with knowledge, pursuing information, study, gaining understanding, and applying what you've learned in ways that allow you to constantly improve what you have learned, introspect on the feedback from the process of application, and make corrective actions. That way you get progress. Absent that, you suffer, or you repeat the same life. Your thoughts, therefore, are key. But I will say this to you, there is no shortcut to success, but with regards to transforming and changing your suffering, with regards to your mind, there is one. It's difficult to focus on your thoughts and how to choose the right thoughts. It's easier instead to protect and stand guard at the gates of your mind. Stand guard at your eye gate, your ear gate, and your person gate. This simply means we are fed hundreds of thousands of thoughts, ideas, pictures, images, words that serve as inputs into our mind every day. Most of them are negative. In addition to that, your subconscious is reinforcing and replaying the predominant thoughts you have in your subconscious, and therefore you find a lot of your fears are not really based on what's out there, but based on what you're replaying in the screen of your mind. So one of the starting points is to say, well, firstly, I'm going to stand guard at the gates and stop what I do not want from coming into my eyes, through my ears, or around me by association. But then the second thing I will do is take my focus to things that edify my spirit and my body and my mind. Focus on things that are good. It's like the great writer. If something is of good report, think of those things. If it's praiseworthy, think of those things. If it's beautiful, if it's kind, if it's generous, focus on the virtues rather than the vices. So we talk about the 7 deadly sins and the vices and gluttony and lust and anger and all of that. Take your focus away from all of those things and push them towards virtues. Purity, chastity, kindness, temperance, forgiveness, tolerance. Those are more virtues. And by doing that, what you do is you focus on the things you want. And the more you focus on the things you want, the things that you focus on expand in your life and manifest through the process of displacement, push away the bad thoughts and replace them with good thoughts. So therefore, you're not thinking about what you're thinking about. You're simply controlling the faculty of your mind, which works as a cinema. and you're choosing what to play, and you reinforce what is positive, and you get emotionally involved with those positive ideas, and they displace the negative ideas. Really that simple. But it's not easy. It's not easy. So the great writer Paul says that you must constantly renew your mind. So for some people who suffer from depression and anxiety, here's a recommendation. In other words, this is where you can start. Firstly, if you're listening to this, it's a starting point. You need education to know what to do better, but you also need some form of inspiration and motivation. You combine both, you have the recipe that ignites a desire inside you, but sustains that desire so that you can learn. You want two things. You want humility, because if you have enough humility, then you can learn. But you want a little bit of a touch of, you might say, I won't use the word arrogance. You don't want too much of that, because you then think you can't learn from another party. But you need confidence in what you're learning so that you're able to apply what you have learned and see the results. If you have too much confidence, you will never learn. If you have no confidence whatsoever, you will never apply what you may have learned. If you have too much humility, you might find people walk all over you. If you have too little humility, you might find people don't want to walk around you. It's understanding how to balance all of those. So, as I bring today's session to a close, let me say as follows. You were created as one of the highest forms of creation. There's something about you that is special. Whether you're suffering from depression or anxiety or just a difficult phase in your life, if you can keep these words in mind, I think you can overcome any setback or any obstacle in your way. The words are as follows. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. Just remind yourself of any time you feel down and outcast and worried and perhaps thinking about taking the path of least resistance, which is taking a permanent solution to what might be temporary. Just remind yourself that this too shall pass, and that the universe is unfolding as it should. And whilst you may not understand how it unfolds, you are a child of the universe. You have every right to be here. You were loved. You may not be aware of the fact that you were loved, but you are, and therefore you should give yourself some grace. I have found for most people who suffer from concern or worry and anxiety that there isn't enough love and grace extended towards themselves. You want a healthy dose of grace towards yourself, but you also want a healthy dose of holding yourself responsible. So for example, the way this works is, you don't say, woe is me. You say, this too shall pass. He that is in me is greater than he that is in the world. There's nothing out there that can actually hurt me other than what's within myself. And therefore, I'm going to give myself hope. But when you fall short of perhaps your goals, don't beat yourself up too much. Whatever your decisions in the past may have been, and I find a lot of people struggle with depression and anxiety in a large part by decisions they made in the past for which they are still ashamed of. Guilt is a horrible emotion. Guilt is not from the pure spirit. Guilt, you want conviction. And conviction brings you to a point of you recognizing what you should have done better. But you don't want guilt, because guilt reinforces a negative energy that causes you to suffer and wants you to pay with your life. So let me use a story as I end today's session. I apologize for those who perhaps are not, you might say, inclined with this particular ideology. Two people. One is called Peter, one is called Judas. Both are one of the 12 disciples, according to the books of antiquities and the gospel, the Christian gospel. I find the two fascinating for a number of reasons. One, the master says to both of them, respectively and in different occasions. To Judas he says, "You will betray me." And to Peter, he says, "You will deny me." Fascinating. They both profess their love for the master. And the master says to Peter, "Before the cock crows, you will betray me 3 times tonight, before the cock crows." And to Judas he says, "You will sell me for money." Now I find the story of both of them to be interesting for a number of reasons. Judas sold his master for money. When he had the money in his hands, when he had achieved what was supposed to be his goal or dream of money, wealth, he felt guilty. He realized, well, the idea of acquiring money was much better than actually the reality, which is the same for most people. And he had regrets. So, most people have regrets. Judas was brave enough to go back and say, "I did the wrong thing. Here is the money, take it back. I do not want to be part of that history." Those who he made the bargain with said, "Well, to hell with you, we gave you the money, you do with the money as you please." Judas could not forgive himself. He threw the money away and he hung himself. Regret. Peter, on the night that his master was sold off, or betrayed rather, denied his master 3 times, which, if you were to ask me, perhaps was just, if not worse, than Judas's. One betrayed his master, the other denied him 3 times. But Peter, unlike Judas, had a level of remorse in himself. He was convicted, just like Judas. Both were convicted. But Peter transfigured himself beyond the image he had about himself, about this traitor, the person who betrayed his master, someone he had professed to love, and he had to see beyond his actions. He created a new thought about who he could become, and shortly after his master was taken away, he took the responsibility that came with his decision and said, "I will stand firm now, because I did something wrong, I had my conviction, and I forgive myself. I give myself grace." Judas could not give himself grace, and so he took the way out, the easy way out. And for many people who suffer from anxiety or depression, stress, trauma, you have to learn how to give yourself grace. But you cannot achieve grace without the right thoughts. Because in order for you to have grace and gift it to yourself, you must see the transfigured form of yourself in the future. And that means you must use your imagination to imagine yourself in a better place, as a better person, living a better life, helping good people. And when you've created that picture of the future, you must bring that picture into the present and start to act like that person who you want to become in the future. And suddenly, those new thoughts, based on the image you've created, if you repeat those thoughts regularly, will start to change your feelings in the present. Those feelings will compel you to act in a certain way. Those actions will create new habits, new routines, a new character. That character will lead to a lifestyle. And someday, you will look up and say, "I have become that person I hoped to be." So you start with depression, and you see yourself as someone who actually is well, who's healthy, who is happy. And you just repeat that. You get emotionally involved with that picture. You think about it regularly. You write it down as a goal. You decide what you want. You write it down. You review that goal regularly. Ideally, write it on a piece of paper and every day look at that paper. I'm a healthy, happy, successful person with loved ones and those who I care for. And you repeat that goal. And don't worry if it sounds absurd and silly and stupid. It's the results that matter. I'm going to stop today's session here. And in the sessions that follow, I will expand on this idea of your thoughts and how it starts to connect with your self-image, and what you can do.